Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee L, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster Diode Wiring Kit. But before we get into that, why don't we take a minute, check it out, and make sure it's going to work for you. So before we jump right in, why don't we just kind of touch base and refresh ourselves on the 5 main parts that we're going to need to flat tow our Jeep down the road in the first place. First one will be the base plate. That's going to provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. Tow bar is going to be the second part, and this is going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of our Jeep to the back of our motorhome. Third main component will be safety cables, and these are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. Fourth main component will be your tow bar wiring. And what this is going to do is transfer your lighting functions from the back of your RV to the back of your Jeep, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component will be a supplemental braking system. What that's going to do is apply the brakes in your Jeep whenever you hit the brakes in your coach, bringing you to a more predictable and safe stop. This is a good example of how everything's going to work. So we got the left turn signal going on our motorhome. It's getting transferred back here to our Jeep. That way people know what's going on. That's going to hold true for the right turn, your tail lights, and your brake lights as well, so you have all your bases covered. When it comes to tow bar wiring, honestly, especially on a vehicle like this, I feel like diodes are definitely the way to go. That's what I always recommend. And I say it because once they're installed, you're not even going to know they're there, really. And more importantly, they're super easy to hook up. So whenever you're ready to flat tow, all you're going to have to do is plug them in at the front. And that's definitely much easier than dealing with, let's say, magnetic lights, for example, which those are going to require you to, they stick on the vehicle. And honestly, not sure if this is even metal or not. It might be aluminum, so they might not even work to begin with. But you're going to have to run your wires up every time, set it up, when you're not flat towing, take it all apart, store a big bundle of wires around. It's not ideal, for a lot of people. And so something like this really makes it much simpler. Whenever you are ready to hook up, like I said, all you do is plug in. So you have an end that plugs into the Jeep and then to the back of your motorhome. And that's it. You don't have to, turn anything on or anything along those lines. So really straightforward. There are several different kits available. And really the main difference between them is what type of umbilical cord you're going to get, which is this piece here. And there's several different styles, and they all have kind of a purpose. So, for example, if you have a tow bar that does not have channels in it, excuse me, for example, this Blue Ox one here, you're going to want to use a kit that has a coiled cable, like this one. That way it stays high off the ground when you're going straight, but then it'll stretch out whenever you make those wide turns. So this particular one is a 7-way on the motorhome side, 6-way on the vehicle side. Really popular. That's the one I recommend. For whatever reason, if you want a 4-way around on the vehicle side, there's a kit available for that too. My thought is if you're going through the trouble to hook everything up already, might as well have the 6-way. That way you can put a charge line on in the future or whatever the case may be. And then there's kits that have straight cables. So for example, this one here. So it's a 7 to 6 and it's straight, and you would use this if your tow bar has channels in it. So for example, the Falcon, I believe it's the All-Terrain made by Roadmaster, has channels. You want this type of kit, that way you can run the cable through those channels and utilize it like it should be used. And there's kind of a hybrid kit as well. So you have a 7 to 6, it's straight, but on the motorhome side it has a slight coilage. And again, use this with tow bars that have channels, especially if you have a high-low adapter here or a lot of space between the two vehicles. This one's really long, so you could buy a little extra space there. So that would be an option there. And then there's a 4-way flat, so to the motorhome, to 4-way flat to the vehicle. This is really not common at all. If you had a really old motorhome that only had a 4-way flat on it or something, this might be an option for you. But, even though it's not common, it doesn't mean some people aren't going to use it. So it's definitely available. And then you have a kit that I like to call kind of the bare bones kit. Comes with your diodes, the wiring, and kind of some ins and outs. It doesn't come with an umbilical or connector plug. And that's available because some of the tow bars actually come included with it. So for example, the Roadmaster Nighthawk, that comes with the umbilical and the connector plug. So that's where you would use that bare bones type kit, because when it makes sense for you to buy two of the same things, right? So that's why that one is available. But you know, with all that said, it's really nice. You have a bunch of different options that you can kind of tailor to your particular situation. Other than that, at the end of the day, you know, when it comes to tow bar wiring, definitely the option I'd recommend. You know, you hook up, you're done. You know, you don't have all this stuff to store and route and deal with all this every time you want to flat tow. So kind of a no-brainer for me. In terms of the installation, it's really not complicated per se. It is time consuming though, running all the wires and everything else. But as long as you stay focused, you know, it's something you should be able to do. And hopefully our video can help you out along the way. And with that said, why don't we go ahead, pull into the garage and do that together now. To begin our installation, we're gonna be here at the front of our Jeep, and we have the fascia removed, and that's because we're doing this wiring the same time that we're doing our base plate, which is what I suggest doing. You got all this extra room to work, but with that said, it can be done with everything together. It's just gonna be a little more tricky. But with that in mind, first things first, we're gonna take our wiring and just start to kind of run it here at the front where we can get it hooked up. First things first, you're gonna take your rubber dust boot, put that over the wiring, and I'm doing this wiring, you know, I'm doing our diode wiring and our charge line wiring here at the same time. So that's what this red wire is, and this is our diode wiring. And that's because this is essentially going up to the same area. So it makes sense to do this once, you know, while you're in the back of everything. So if you're in that situation too, that's what I advise doing. It'll save you a little bit of time. But with that said, all the wires are going to need to be stripped back a little ways. That way we can hook them up to our connector plug. You want to give the wires a good twist, so that way the connection will be sufficient once we plug it into the connector plug. And on the connector plug, there's going to be several terminals here that the way these are going to work is you loosen up the set screw pretty much all the way, try not to pull it completely out, and we'll get our wire in and tighten it back down. For our diode wiring, we're going to be hooking up 4 wires. We have TM for tail light, so the brown wire will go to it. This one's labeled GD for ground, so the white wire will go there. This one is LT for left turn, so the yellow wire will go into it. And then RT for right turn, so the green wire will get installed in that one. So you're just simply going to take the appropriate color wire, put it into the proper terminal, and tighten down the set screw. Just continue that for the remaining wires. Once the wiring is hooked up, you can take the dust cover there, place it over the back. Eventually I'll come back with some sealer and seal everything up, tape it up real good to prevent any corrosion, but I like to wait until we know everything's working. That way if you have to get back in here, it's not a big mess. Well, with that in mind, we can get this secured. So our base plate actually came with a bracket here and some screws to get this all squared away. Once that's secure, we can start to route our wiring. I just went up through here, and eventually I'll come back, put some lube on this and secure it, you know, with some zip ties. But just ran it kind of right up under through there. And it starts to go up and comes out in the engine compartment. And what you're gonna do is just carefully cut the white wire in half. And be real careful when you're doing this, you don't wanna nick the other wires. So cut it in half, and then you can start to kind of peel it away. The side that just goes to the end of the roll of wire You're gonna peel that completely off until it separates from the rest of the harness, which we'll get back to that, but make sure it's all the way off, and you want to hold on to that bundle of wire there too, because we will reuse it a little bit later on. But so this end is what we're left with, and this is the end that goes actually to our 6-way connector. We're gonna need to ground it, and it turns out there's a stud right there that'll work perfect. So I'll take a 13mm socket and we'll get this removed. And then we can take our wire, strip back the insulation, give it a twist, and put on a ring terminal. Crimp it down. We'll just slide this wire over the stud. Take the nut and we'll just tighten it back down. And now that it's connected, we'll take the rest of our harness here and route this towards the back of our vehicle, where we can get it connected up by our taillights. So continue to get our wiring routed. So it's pretty tight in here, bear with us here, but just runs along through here. It kind of goes into this opening where it goes down through a grommet underneath our vehicle. So now underneath the vehicle, this is where our wiring drops down, kind of behind our wheel well liner, I guess you could say. And then it starts to open up a little bit finally. The wire just continues to route along through here, where I then have it going along our pinch weld. So whenever you route this, make sure to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. Use some zip ties every now and again to keep it secure. But it just continues on back. And then right here, I kind of swung it inward because I didn't want to continue here because this is a jack point. So if you were to jack your car up by here, I don't want to pinch the wire. So brought it up along through here. Kind of just follow this factory wire. Here's the wire starts to kind of kick in. And then just runs up along through here and over the top of our subframe. And just be careful here, you got a lot of stuff going on, moving around, so be sure to avoid all that. And then there's really not a great spot to go here, so I kind of improvised. I ran our wire down, and then I very carefully drilled a couple of holes in our spare tire shield on the inside, because you got your hot exhaust here, and then you don't want to interfere with the spare tire, and there's just not a lot of room. So I zip tied this up on the inside nice and tight. That way, if we let the spare down, it won't get hung up. Keeps it away from the exhaust a little bit. And then I continued to route it up. And then here is where I separated the green wire and started to route it towards the passenger side, which we'll get to in a minute. But right here, so we have our yellow and brown, and then we took the extra white wire that we had left over from our ground and taped one end of it to it. And eventually all three are gonna run up into the driver's side taillight pocket. The other end of the white wire will get carried over with our green one, because it's gonna be a jumper. So the extra white wire is essentially just gonna run from the driver's side to the passenger side, connecting to both the diodes. But these wires, I simply just routed up along through here, and it was pretty close. You might have to extend the wire a little bit, you know, if it falls short. But if we continue up, and then up through there is where I have it running up into the taillight pocket. Now up top here, you can open up your hatch and we can get the taillights removed. So you're gonna have a plastic shield here. It's held in place with the push pin fastener. These are pretty tight to get out, so I don't scratch everything up. I'm using a plastic trim tool if you can. Like I said, these things are really tight, so kind of is what it is. Get underneath of it. Pry that fastener out. And this piece kind of just pop off. Set that to the side. We're going to have a fastener there holding our taillight in. All right, it's a T30 Torx bit. That pulled on out. We should be able to grab our tail light, kind of carefully work it back and forth and out diagonally a little bit. Then we'll disconnect it. Connector there. Push back on that red tab. And then down on the center of that connector to separate it. We'll set our light off to the side and do the same thing to get the passenger one out as well. Now we can get our wiring pulled up into the taillight pocket. So I just used a fish wire. I dropped it down and taped our wiring to it. I just used a piece of tubing. You could use a coat hanger or whatever you got around the house. But we will pull this up into position here. Get that removed, then we can start to prep these ends and figure out what wires we actually need to hook up. So I took the new wiring we ran, stripped the insulation back. The yellow wire you're going to put on a blue terminal and crimp it down. The white and brown wire, you're going to do something a little different. You're going to twist those two ends together nice and tight. Put on the yellow terminal over both those ends there. And crimp it down. Then I took our factory wiring. So this has had some tape on it. Pulled the tape off so we could see what we're doing here. And I tested the wires to find our taillight signal and our brake light signal. So the yellow wire, this one here, it's going to be we're going to use that for a stop and turn. Then the white wire with the light gray stripe right underneath the yellow wire, that's going to be for our taillights. So I'm going to cut these little ways down. Strip each end back, twist it, and put on a blue terminal. So I'll do the same thing for our remaining ends. And all four of our ends done up there. And now we can take our diodes and peel off the backing paper there and stick them together. Then the side that says out, the single terminal, these ends will slide on closest to the taillight connector. That's how you want them set up. And you'll just go color for color. So the yellow wire goes to the factory yellow, and the factory white and gray goes to the factory white and gray to complete that connection. And then, since it kind of works out actually in this case, since the yellow wire, the factory yellow is for our stop and turn, that's where our new yellow wire is for, so that'll get connected to that diode, like that. And then with the factory white and gray wire being the taillights, we'll connect the new white and brown wire to it, just like so. And then with these all hooked up, we can grab our taillight, get it plugged in, and reinstall it. Just like how we removed it, we'll just plug everything back in, lock it down, try to position our diodes in a way to where, you know, they're going to fit in there and not move all over the place. And just put the light back in. Over here on the passenger side, essentially set up the same way. You know, how the diodes work and everything. Only difference is going to be the color of the factory wires. So the factory green wire is going to be for stop and turn. Factory white wire with the orange stripe, that's going to be for our tail light. So our new green wire will go to the diode that has the factory green wire, and the new white wire will go to the diode that has the factory white and orange stripe wire. So that's really all there is to it. Once it's set up, again, these will just get reinstalled. So what we're able to do now is test our wiring to make sure that it's working properly. So I'm just hooked up to a test box, which is going to simulate our RV. Keep in mind, if you use your motorhome, if it has any wiring issues, that could translate over to this side and mislead you into thinking it's an error on this side of the vehicle. But with that in mind, we'll go ahead, run through our signals, and check everything out. So we'll go ahead and turn on our tail lights. Then we can check our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Diode Wiring Kit on our 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee L.